Today we're tackling something foundational, but often seen from wildly different angles, how we actually think about management and organizations. We've got some incredible source material to guide us, a set of lecture notes that lay out two major and frankly fascinatingly opposed contemporary approaches.
That's right. We're pulling apart critical management studies, or CMS, and contrasting it with positive organizational scholarship, POS. Think of them as like two completely different lenses you can use to look at the same workplace.
Exactly. Our mission here is to sort of cut through the complexity and get you the absolute core of what each approach is, who the key thinkers are, how they show up in the real world, like seriously real, like the gig economy, and where each one really hits home or maybe falls a bit short. The goal is that by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a shortcut to understanding these powerful ideas and why they matter for you. Whether you're running a team, working in one, or just trying to understand the organizational world around us.
It's about giving you the frameworks, really, to ask smarter questions about the places where we spend so much of our time and energy.
So let's start with that first lens, critical management studies. Just hearing the name critical tells you something. What's the core impulse behind CMS?
The core impulse is to question everything, seriously. CMS applies critical theories, ideas drawn from sociology, philosophy, political science, straight on to organizations and management practices. It's not really interested in just optimizing the existing system. It wants to understand how that system came to be, and importantly, who it serves.
Right, so it's not about finding the best practice, but maybe asking whose practice is this best for?
Precisely. Its key focus areas are power dynamics, inequality, and social justice within the workplace. It's asking who has power, how's it exercised, who benefits from that, and crucially, who is marginalized by the way organizations are structured and run.
Okay, that sharp questioning focus makes sense. And these notes we have make a strong connection between CMS and postmodernism. We touched on postmodernism before, that movement that really challenges the idea of a single universal truth, right? How do these two connect?
The connection is vital for understanding CMS. Yeah. Postmodernism says, knowledge is subjective, truth isn't fixed, interpretations vary. When CMS takes that lens and points it at management, it immediately questions those traditional, often just taken for granted ideas about how organizations should work.
Those things like hierarchy is necessary or profit is the only goal. CMS, drawing on postmodernism, would see those as just one way of seeing things, maybe not the only way or even the best way.
Exactly. Postmodernism helps CMS see these traditional ideas not as universal laws, but as grand narratives, basically, stories we tell ourselves about organizations. And often these are stories that benefit certain groups. So both approaches work to sort of deconstruct these narratives.
And they both talk about power, but is the emphasis a bit different?
Well, CMS is deeply concerned with the reality of power relations in organizations, who holds it, how it's used, the actual impact. Postmodernism adds this fascinating layer by highlighting how discourse, the language we use, the management buzzwords, the stories told, isn't neutral. It actually constructs and reinforces those power structures.
So the way a CEO talks about synergy or human capital isn't just jargon. CMS would say it's part of building a specific reality that might serve certain interests.
That's a core CMS insight, rooted in its postmodern influences. The language of management is a tool of power. And crucially, both perspectives emphasize that our understanding of organizations is subjective. It's shaped by our position, our experiences, our power, or lack thereof within that system.
Which fundamentally challenges the idea that management decisions are purely rational or objective. There's always perspective involved.
Always, yeah. And flowing from this critical standpoint, a core commitment of CMS is to actively highlight and amplify the voices of those often silenced or marginalized within traditional organizational structures.
Okay, so the big takeaway from this connection is that both give us this powerful lens to see beyond the surface, right? To question assumptions and to recognize how power and perspective shape pretty much everything in organizations.
It's about developing a healthy skepticism towards the conventional wisdom in management, a really critical eye.
Speaking of how this approach emerged, the notes give us a quick history. CMS really started gaining steam in the 1980s, was it?
Yes, it emerged largely as a pushback. The dominant research in management back then was very neoclassical and positivist, focused on efficiency, objective measurement, treating organizations almost like machines. CMS came along saying, hold on, you're missing the human, the social, the political reality here. Early figures like Wilfred Burrell, Gareth Morgan, and David Knights were really key in those foundational years.
And it sounds like it didn't stay narrow. It started pulling in other critical perspectives in the 90s.
Absolutely. That's when it became much richer, I think, by incorporating insights from feminist theory, examining gender and power, post colonial theory, looking at global power dynamics, and queer theory, challenging norms around identity and structure. This just broadened its critique of power and inequality even further.
And it kept evolving after that.
Into the 2000s and beyond, yeah. It continued to integrate new theories to grapple with contemporary issues like globalization, sustainability, and the increasing complexity of diversity in organizations. It's a field that really tries to stay responsive to the changing world of work.
So, through this history, what were the constant threads, the things that really define CMS?
Several key themes persist, I'd say. First, that unwavering focus on power and inequality. That's central. Second, the critique of dominant management discourses challenging the taken for granted language and ideas. Third, a deep commitment to social justice and ethics, asking not just if something is efficient, but if it's fair and just. And finally, its strong interdisciplinarity, drawing knowledge from anywhere, useful sociology, philosophy, anthropology, political science, history.
It sounds like its main impact has been forcing management thinking to confront its own assumptions and maybe its blind spots.
Precisely. It demands a more critical, reflective, and socially conscious approach to management.
Now, to bring this all to life, the notes use the gig economy as a case study for CMS analysis.
Yeah.
This feels incredibly relevant right now, doesn't it? Affecting so many people.
Oh, it's a perfect example. Because a gig economy, this whole world of short-term project-based work, often mediated by digital platforms like Uber, Lyft, or Upwork, Fiverr, you name it, it presents a whole new set of organizational dynamics that CMS is uniquely equipped to analyze critically.
So how does CMS look at something like, say, Uber? What questions does it ask?
It immediately looks at the power relations. CMS highlights the immense power held by the platform companies. They dictate the algorithms, they set prices, manage ratings, control access to work. This leaves the individual gig worker with very limited bargaining power, facing job insecurity and often at a higher risk of exploitation.
Right. So while it looks like individual contractors choosing their hours, CMS sees a deeper power imbalance underneath that surface.
Absolutely. It cuts through the rhetoric. And speaking of rhetoric, CMS analyzes the discourse surrounding the gig economy. The language is all about flexibility, being your own boss, autonomy. CMS points out how this ideology of flexibility often masks the reality of precarious work, low and unpredictable income, and a lack of benefits or labor protections.
It's the language of freedom, but CMS asks if it's actually freedom from things like basic worker rights.
Exactly that, yeah. The platforms control the narrative, emphasizing the perceived benefits while downplaying the risks and the downsides. CMS also brings essential ethical considerations to the forefront. Concerns about worker welfare, significant income inequality between platform owners and workers, the mental and physical toll of that insecurity.
And even the broader social picture, does it look at that?
Yes. CMS analyzes how the gig economy is fundamentally changing traditional employment models and labor relations, potentially weakening collective bargaining power across the board. It also looks at how it can exacerbate existing social inequalities, particularly for marginalized groups who might be pushed into gig work, but then face additional barriers or risks within that system.
Wow. So CMS provides this powerful sort of X-ray vision into something like the gig economy, stripping away the marketing language to reveal the underlying power structures and the potential for inequality.
It helps you see the hidden costs and, crucially, who bears them.
Let's spend a moment on some of the specific prominent figures in CMS mentioned in the notes. David Knights is a key name here.
David Knights, yeah, he was instrumental in introducing critical and postmodern perspectives directly into the field of organizational studies. His work really challenged the mainstream from within.
So he wasn't just an outside critic. He was trying to redefine how we study organizations themselves.
Precisely. His book, Organization Theory and Management Practice, really dissects traditional theories, classical, neoclassical, showing their limitations and capturing the full complexity. He integrated postmodern ideas like deconstruction, focusing on power and discourse, to analyze organizations as much more fluid and contested spaces than traditional views suggested.
And he really emphasized that management isn't just a technical skill set.
That's a major point for him. Yeah. He argued that management is fundamentally a discursive practice, meaning managers aren't just implementing neutral processes. They are using language, creating narratives, performing roles that actively construct and legitimize organizational reality and the power structures within it.
So management isn't just doing things. It's shaping what counts as reality within the organization.
Yeah.
That's a powerful idea.
It fundamentally shifts how you view the manager's role, doesn't it? Next up is Jeff P. Buchanan, author of The Idea of the Firm, A Critical Analysis.
Sounds like he's questioning the very bedrock concept of what a company even is.
He is, yeah. Buchanan critically examines how we've traditionally understood the firm, whether through, say, neoclassical economics focused on efficiency or managerialism focused on leadership control. He argues these views are just too narrow and incomplete.
And he brings in those critical perspectives to broaden the view.
Exactly. He uses social theory, CMS, and postmodernism to explore alternative ways of understanding the firm, seeing it less as a purely economic machine and much more as a complex social and political entity.
So for Buchanan, the firm is a social construct.
That's his central argument. The firm isn't some fixed objective entity out there. It's shaped by culture, by history, by power, by politics. He looks at power and control within firms through this lens, and importantly, considers the ethical dimensions like corporate social responsibility and sustainability as inherent parts of understanding what a firm is.
So it's not just about maximizing shareholder value in his view. It's about recognizing the firm's social and ethical footprint as part of its very definition.
It broadens the scope significantly, yeah. Finally, Stephen Clegg and his book, Organizations, From Modernity to Postmodernity.
Okay, that title suggests he's looking at the evolution, the historical shift in how organizations look and operate.
Precisely. Clegg provides the sweeping analysis of how organizations have transformed as societies have moved from the modern era, characterized by ideas of stability, order, rationalization, giving rise to structures like bureaucracies, into the postmodern era, marked by uncertainty, fragmentation, and rapid change.
And he links these eras to different organizational forms we see.
Yes, he analyzes how different organizational structures, bureaucratic, network, entrepreneurial, relate to these broader societal shifts. Like the others, he examines power and control dynamics and the crucial role of organizational culture in navigating these changes.
And he tries to peer into the future a bit.
His work offers insights into the potential trajectory of organizations, considering major forces like globalization, technological acceleration, and social change.
Yeah. So Knights, Buchanan, and Clegg collectively give us this powerful toolkit for deconstruction, urging us to question assumptions, see organizations as socially and politically shaped, and always be mindful of power and inequality.
They are absolutely foundational in challenging the established management orthodoxy.
Okay. Wow. We've really immersed ourselves in the critical perspective there. Now, the notes take us on a pretty sharp turn, signaling a shift to positive organizational scholarship, or POS. This feels almost like the flip side of CMS.
It does, and that contrast is really important. If CMS is asking, what's wrong here? Who is being disadvantaged? What are the power imbalances? Well, POS is asking a very different set of questions.
So what is POS at its heart then?
POS is a research perspective focused on studying what makes organizations and the people within them flourish. It's intentionally optimistic and constructive, shifting away from traditional organizational research that often, focuses on problems, dysfunctions, deficits.
So instead of analyzing what's broken, it analyzes what works well, what leads to success.
Exactly. It shines a light on the positive aspects: individual and organizational strengths, human well-being, resilience in the face of challenges, the capacity for positive relationships. The goal is really to understand the conditions and dynamics that promote ethical behavior, foster human thriving, and lead to genuinely positive work environments.
That sounds like a much more, uplifting perspective to study. What are the key ideas that drive this?
There are several core concepts. One is identifying and cultivating strengths and virtues, both in individuals and at the organizational level. What are people naturally good at? What are the organizational values and capabilities that promote good outcomes?
Leveraging what's right, basically.
Right. It also deeply values the role of positive emotions, things like hope, optimism, gratitude, joy. These aren't just feel-good states. POS research shows they have functional benefits like broadening thinking, building resilience, and fostering high performance.
And finding meaning in work. Is that part of it?
Crucial. POS explores how individuals find purpose and meaning in their jobs, and how that sense of meaning contributes not just to their own well-being, but also to the organization's success. Also key is the importance of positive relationships, the quality of connections between colleagues, leaders, and teams as a driver of productivity, trust, and job satisfaction.
And it seems to also focus on creating conditions for growth, like creativity.
Yes, fostering creativity and innovation. POS looks at the environment and leadership styles that allow novel ideas and solutions to emerge. The overarching aim is to understand and actively promote the conditions under which both individuals and organizations can truly thrive.
Thriving feels like a step beyond just performing well. It implies well-being, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a more holistic view of success.
Give us a sense of the history of POS. When did this distinct focus emerge?
Well, while it definitely built on existing research in psychology and organizational behavior, POS really crystallized as a distinct field in the late 1990s. It offered a fresh perspective at a time when much of the management literature was still heavily focused on problems like stress, burnout, conflict.
It sounds like it was filling a gap, perhaps.
It definitely offered a refreshing, optimistic contrast. The late 90s saw early pioneers like Fred Luthans and Kim Cameron starting to specifically study positive concepts like hope and resilience in the workplace. But the key moment that really established the field was probably the publication of the 2003 book, Positive Organizational Scholarship, A New Perspective on Organizations, by Luthans, Cameron, and Richard Klimowski.
That book sounds like its manifesto, maybe.
It really was in many ways. It laid out the core principles, defined the scope, and provided a research agenda that kind of galvanized the field. In the 2010s, POS continued to expand, looking more deeply into areas like positive organizational culture, authentic leadership, and employee engagement, becoming more interdisciplinary itself, much like CMS in that regard.
Okay, let's look at some of the key figures in POS mentioned in the notes. Fred Luthans is listed as a pioneer.
Fred Luthans, yes, he's considered a foundational figure. That 2003 book was truly seminal in defining POS.
And his big contribution was advocating for that shift in focus we talked about.
Yes, he was a strong voice for moving away from solely studying problems and dysfunction to a more constructive focus on what's working well. He identified what he called positive organizational behaviors, things like optimism, hope, resilience, creativity as measurable qualities. Qualities that are not just positive in themselves, but actually drive performance and positive outcomes.
So not just abstract concepts, but observable behaviors you can actually cultivate.
Exactly. He also highlighted positive organizational resources, things like trust within a team, gratitude, even forgiveness as essential building blocks. His work covers developing a positive organizational culture and the practical ways POS can be applied in, say, leadership development, fostering engagement, and navigating change positively.
Next, Barbara Fredrickson, known more broadly for her work in positive psychology. How did she influence POS?
Profoundly. While she's a psychologist, her research provided theoretical cornerstones that POS readily adopted. Her broaden and build theory is particularly influential.
What does that theory propose? What's the core idea?
It suggests that positive emotions do more than just make us feel good in the moment. They actually broaden our mindset, expanding our thoughts and actions. And over time, this broadening helps us build durable personal resources, things like optimism, creativity, resilience, social connections.
Interesting. So feeling good isn't just the outcome. It's also a way to build capacity for the future.
Precisely. POS takes this theory to understand how cultivating positive emotions in the workplace can enhance not just individual well-being, but also team effectiveness and organizational adaptability. She's also known for the concept of the positivity ratio, suggesting a certain ratio of positive to negative emotions might be optimal for flourishing. An idea explored within POS for creating supportive work environments.
And her work on resilience seems key here too, right? Especially for organizations.
Yes. Her research demonstrated how positive emotions significantly enhance the ability of people, and by extension organizations, to bounce back from adversity and thrive even in challenging circumstances.
Finally, Sandra Lubomirsky, another psychologist focused on happiness research.
Lubomirsky brings a deep, research-based understanding of individual happiness and well-being that POS draws upon heavily. One of our most well-known ideas is about the components of happiness.
The percentage breakdown one, I think I've heard of that.
Yes, exactly. She suggests that approximately 50% of our happiness set point might be genetically determined. About 10% is due to life circumstances, which are surprisingly less influential than we often think. And a significant 40% comes from intentional activities, the things we choose to do.
That 40% is the powerful part, isn't it? The part you can actually influence.
Exactly, and that aligns perfectly with the POS focus on cultivating positive states. Her happiness formula, happiness equals genetic plus circumstances plus intentional activities, really emphasizes the power of conscious effort. She's identified specific happiness activities backed by research. Simple things like practicing gratitude, performing acts of kindness, investing in social connections.
Actionable steps for boosting well-being, things people can actually do.
Yes. And importantly, she also explores the hedonic treadmill, the idea that we tend to adapt to positive changes over time, which highlights why ongoing intentional effort is needed to maintain happiness levels. It's not a one and done thing.
Okay, so Luthens gives us the organizational behaviors, Fredrickson the functional role of positive emotions, and Lubomirsky the science of intentional individual happiness, all contributing to this powerful POS perspective.
They provide a really robust research foundation for understanding and promoting flourishing in the workplace.
Now, while POS paints a very appealing picture, it's crucial as the notes remind us to apply a critical eye, even to positivity itself. No single theory is perfect, right? POS faces criticisms and limitations.
Absolutely. And understanding the critiques doesn't diminish the value of POS, but it helps us use it wisely and know its boundaries. One major criticism is the potential overemphasis on positivity.
Meaning it might ignore the necessary downsides or challenges, or the value of negative feelings.
Precisely. Critics argue that by focusing so heavily on the positive, POS might neglect the importance and, frankly, the value of negative emotions. Emotions like frustration, anger, or dissatisfaction can be crucial signals for problems, driving necessary change, critical thinking, and learning.
And it might ignore the dark side of organizations that CMS points to, the power issues, the conflict.
That's a significant point of tension between the two perspectives, definitely. Critics argue POS can sometimes overlook serious issues like unethical behavior, deep-seated conflict, discrimination, or entrenched power imbalances because its lens is set to look for the good.
Another critique mentioned is the potential for oversimplification of complexity. What does that mean?
Yes, it's sometimes accused of not giving enough weight to external or structural factors, things like the industry context, economic downturns, regulatory environments, factors that profoundly impact organizations regardless of the internal positive focus.
And potentially underestimating the power dynamics that CMS highlights so strongly.
That's another core criticism, often from a CMS perspective. Critics argue that focusing on individual positive states or positive relationships within a team might not adequately address how broader power structures and systemic inequalities shape people's experiences, sometimes overriding individual efforts at positivity.
And the concern about superficiality, what's that about?
This critique suggests POS might sometimes focus too much on surface level interventions. Quick fixes to boost morale or engagement without tackling deeper, more complex organizational problems. The concern is that it might prioritize feeling good or appearing positive over addressing fundamental structural issues.
Like putting a smiley face sticker on a broken machine, essentially.
That's the fear, yeah, that the focus on positivity could be superficial if it's not grounded in deeper analysis or structural change. And this leads directly into ethical concerns.
Like pressuring people to be positive, even if they don't feel it.
That's a very real concern. The potential for POS concepts to be misused, creating pressure on employees to perform happiness or optimism, regardless of their genuine feelings or difficult circumstances. This raises serious questions about authenticity and manipulation. And there's the risk of overlooking the negative consequences of excessive positivity, like burnout from constantly feeling you need to perform positivity, or maybe a lack of critical thinking because questioning is seen as negative.
So the takeaway on the criticisms is that while POS offers incredibly valuable insights and tools, we need to be mindful of these limitations. The risk of ignoring the negative, oversimplifying, being superficial, and those potential ethical pitfalls.
A balanced perspective, acknowledging both the light and the shadow, is essential for truly effective organizational understanding and practice, I think.
Wow, okay. We've really traversed some distinct landscapes today, haven't we? We started by diving deep into the critical world of CMS, pulling apart power, inequality, questioning fundamental assumptions, using the lens of postmodernism, and seeing how it applies to the complexities of something like the gig economy, guided by figures like Knights, Buchanan, and Clegg.
And then we pivoted dramatically to explore the optimistic terrain of POS, focusing on strengths, well-being, and understanding what makes individuals and organizations truly thrive. Drawing on pioneers like Luthens, Fredrickson, and Lubomirsky.
They offer such different, almost opposing ways of seeing the same organizational world. CMS helps us uncover the potential problems and the power struggles, while POS helps us identify the potential for human flourishing and peak performance.
And understanding both is really key, isn't it? They might seem contradictory on the surface, but they offer complementary insights. A nuanced view of organizations, I believe, benefits from both the critical questions raised by CMS and the focus on human potential highlighted by POS.
Absolutely. Whether you're leading a team, navigating your own career, or simply trying to understand the dynamics at play in the places where we work, These frameworks provide powerful tools. They help you see beneath the surface of the glossy corporate reports and also identify genuine pathways to building better, more fulfilling work environments.
They give you a richer vocabulary, a better way to make sense of your own experiences and organizations.
So let's leave you with this thought to consider. Given the tension between these two powerful perspectives, CMS pushing us to see hidden power structures and inequality, and POS encouraging us to focus on building strengths and fostering well-being. How might a truly ethical and effective modern organization integrate insights from both? Can you be deeply critical of power while simultaneously and genuinely focused on fostering thriving for everyone? What would that actually look like in practice?
That's the challenge, isn't it? A challenge for every organization and really every individual within it.